Well, one of the biggest features of interplay is the workshops that are happening, collaborations between the opera singers that make up interplay, but also the chamber musicians and collaborative pianists who are here as well that are redefining works both new and old. We told you a couple of weeks ago about the St. Matthew Passion workshops that was getting a bit of a modern makeover in advance of its 300th anniversary in 2027. This same ensemble of singers is also working on new compositions, new pieces by a composer still very much with us today. Talking about the Canadian-American composer Karim al-Zand, celebrated in both countries and on the faculty at Rice University in Houston. A variety of his works are getting showcased and workshopped here, and he's taken a little bit of time to join us here on Classic 107. Thanks so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
So maybe first of all, you can speak a little bit to your first encounters with the Banff Centre. When was that, and how maybe that impacted your career?
Well, this is the first time I've actually been to the Banff Centre. Of course, I've heard lots about it, but I'm enjoying my first experience here. My connection to the Banff Centre is really through Joel Ivany, who, of course, as you know, runs the interplay program here. And I met Joel a little over a year ago, I suppose, and actually I met Joel through his wife, Miriam Khalil, who's a wonderful soprano who I wrote a piece for. So it's, music is a small world, and kind of word gets out. But yeah, Joel has been my wonderful host for this 2 weeks.
Wonderful. Of course, you were raised here in Canada, grew up in the Ottawa area,
Yes.
I understand. What was your impression of maybe classical music in Canada as you were developing your musical voice?
Well, I have to say I have a kind of, there's two parts of my musical upbringing, and one is pretty, I would say, traditional. I took piano lessons, I played in the band, I played recorder when I was a little kid. I sang in a boy choir, so I learned the sort of Western European classical music, and I feel like that's kind of my entry into music. At the same time, in my home, my father, who's from Iraq, played a lot of Arabic music around the house. And though I'd never studied that music formally, I do have it a little bit in my ear. And so sometimes that comes out in my compositions. And the other kind of big influence is jazz, because I did a fair amount of playing. Right up until graduate school, I think, of jazz, and I actually started a big band while I was in graduate school, and I did a lot of arranging for them. And so that a little bit, the sonic world, a little bit of that is in my ear as well.
A musical chameleon right from the get-go, it sounds like. As you listen now to your pieces, and as the audience maybe takes in those pieces, what kinds of characteristics from that sort of Middle Eastern sound world, the roots of your family, what kind of things can they pull out when they listen to your music that is so much rooted in this sort of Western teaching at the same time?
Well, I usually tell people my music is, with some exceptions, it's usually inspired by something that's non-musical, outside of the music. And that can be any number of things, from visual to textual, literary. Some of my pieces are based on paintings of different kinds. I have some music for film. I've written music for dance. And so usually what primes my inspiration is something outside of music. And so in terms of the Middle Eastern cultural influence, it's usually less sonically oriented, and it's more in the kind of folklore and the stories and the kind of imagery and that sort of thing. But yeah, usually there's a thread in any one piece that comes from outside of the music that I feel like is sort of what's used to weave the fabric of it as I write it.
That's a wide inspiration base from which to draw on if you're thinking about the things that are happening out in the world, or paintings or stories. As you're thinking about those influences and you're interacting with the world around you, what kinds of things typically are going to catch your eye or your imagination and say, that's it, that's the thing I have to put a sonic sort of a rendering to?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I think most composers will tell you that, in any particular discipline, take poetry for example, you can read 100 poems and maybe 2 might be ones that you would consider setting. They wouldn't be the same for every composer. But yeah, something about a kind of artistic experience that catches your imagination. Maybe it's very striking imagery, or maybe the words or something that that provokes some sort of musical reaction, or the story is rich with characterization and adventure or what have you. So yeah, it's difficult to say, but usually it's one of those things where you know it when you find it.
So when you think about then, well, even narrow it down even further to say the pieces that are being workshopped here, how did you go about deciding what you wanted to work on in Banff, knowing what you knew about this place even before you stepped onto the campus for the first time?
Well, one of the great things about the interplay program is that it's a workshop, okay? And the notion of a workshop is just one of these prized things for a composer. In other words, you come to the workshop with new music, brand new music, and probably 80%, 85% of the music that's going to be done here, that is being done here, is brand new, hasn't been heard by anybody before, including me. And so the idea of a workshop is that you get to hear this music for the first time, and not only do you hear it, but you get to tweak it. You get to adjust. You get to rewrite. You get to see what works, what doesn't work, and that's a really special thing, when you're working with other artists, because it's not often that you get that second chance, so to speak. So that's been the focus here. Really, it's been sort of hearing these pieces and seeing what works, and then, kind of adjusting. And all the artists here, the singers, the pianists, all the creatives are, they're used to this kind of thing. And it's a really wonderful kind of hothouse, for kind of creating something.
Sure. Another environment or another factor would be probably the environment in which we are creating as well, the hothouse. I love that adjective. How do you think being here at the Banff Centre influences these works compared to, say, if you were holding this workshop at Rice or at another one of your sort of musical usual haunts?
Well, part of it is the ability to stretch out a little bit. I mean, this is 2 weeks we're here, which is really a luxury. And so, normally in most preparatory work for a concert performance, it's usually quite concentrated, right? It usually happens in a very few days, and things kind of move very, very quickly, and there's a certain sort of, kind of tension and inevitability about it that's enjoyable. But here we have 2 weeks, right? And so we're able to sort of take our time, let things settle, let things sink in. And I think for singers especially, that's a really important part of the process, right? It's not just learning the notes and learning the rhythms, it's living with the characters and the stories and the narrative, and sort of, being able to play with things a little bit, which really you need some time to do. So that's kind of what's really been so special about these 2 weeks.
As you've been looking back on these 2 weeks, which are just about to come to a close, culminating in the final performance or sharing of these continued works in progress, what's maybe something that's surprised you about this process compared to other workshops that you may have done with your works in the past?
Well, I think, this group that I'm working with is really fantastic, and they have a certain amount of flexibility. They're really able to change things on the fly, and that's not always the case. And people are not necessarily always quite so nimble, let's say. And that's been quite impressive to me, especially since the pieces that they're doing, 3 of them, the 3 main ones, are quite large and lengthy works, and so it's a lot to take in. And I think that the conductor and the pianist and of course the singers have been really good about sort of distilling things and sort of playing things in discrete sections and sort of being able to negotiate these longer forms, which is, I think, a challenge.
For sure. If you think about the singers who are here this time around, the ensemble that's come together to workshop your pieces actually, in a way, kind of mirrors you, the composer, in a way, in that they come from Canada, but also they have these American roots. Do you think that there would be a distinction as you think about the work that's done on these pieces between people who are working on your music from Canada versus those who are maybe working on it from an American perspective?
That's difficult to say. You know, I teach at a school where the students come from all over, and not only the United States, not only Canada, but internationally. So, you know, my experience, generally speaking, with my music, tends to be pretty cosmopolitan in terms of the people that are executing it. So it's a little bit difficult to sort of parse out, you know, different tendencies. But I will say that the performers here are very open and very kind of accommodating and sort of willing to take risks, willing to go out of their comfort zone to try things, which is just very, very generous, and I really appreciate it.
Maybe we can speak a little bit now. We've kind of talked around what this workshop has looked like. Maybe we can get down to some brass tacks. What kinds of pieces have you been working on here, and what sorts of things can audiences expect to hear from these pieces down the line, maybe in a different venue than in Banff?
So there are three big pieces that are being worked on here, and what was kind of nice is that it's a bit of a mixture between, there's some songs, there's a kind of extended song cycle, there's a kind of a mini chamber opera scene, and then there are two other scenes that are from a larger opera project that's as yet incomplete. So I can tell you a little bit about each one of those. So one is called The Stranger's Case, which is a long, extended, about 30-minute song cycle for tenor and string orchestra. We're playing it in a version that I cooked up for, especially for Banff, which is for piano quintet, so string quartet plus piano, because it's a very kind of string-oriented accompaniment. And it's called The Stranger's Case because it's the subtitle I gave it is Songs and Chronicles of the Immigrant Experience. And I've taken a whole series of texts, poems, but also first-person accounts from people who have immigrated, refugees, people who have come, particularly to the United States, and settled there, and their experiences. So New York Harbor features very prominently, as you can imagine, Ellis Island, etc., Statue of Liberty, and all of that. And I thought, this is a project I've been thinking about for a while, but I thought, you know, especially today, and I don't need to tell you why, you know, this is a particularly resonant, it seems to me, sort of topic. So it's a series of songs that are interconnected, and some of them are, you know, quite melancholy, missing home, that sort of thing. Others are quite, you know, striking in the sort of trepidation that some of these people feel as they come into a new country. So it's poetry, and in addition to that, some first-person accounts that I discovered in this wonderful book that was written in 1906 called "The Stories." It has a very odd title of "The Stories of Undistinguished Americans as Told by Themselves." And it's literally first-person accounts of people coming to Ellis Island and describing, you know, how their family endured the travails of the sea voyage and that sort of thing. So that's one piece that we're doing. Another one is, it's a short comic scene, about as far from that in tone and tenor as you can imagine. It's a short comic scene based on a short story by O. Henry, the American turn of the 20th century author who's known for his short stories and the humor of his short stories, and also particularly surprise endings of many of his stories. So I adapted one of his stories. It's originally called Makes the Whole World Kin, and my version of it is called A Joint Interest. And there are three characters, and it's written for an ensemble of 9 players, but we're going to be playing it with 2 pianos. And there are 3 characters, and it's much more lighthearted and sort of opera buffa type thing, comic opera. And I think we're having a lot of fun putting that together. So that's the second project. And then the third one is 2 discrete scenes from a larger opera project that I've been doing for several years now, and probably will do for several years more, called, the opera project is called A Book of Tales. The Book of Tales. And we're doing 2 scenes from that, and not to get too into the weeds about it, but basically the story of the overall opera is the story of the 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights. How did these come about? How did we come to know about them in the West? Which is a fascinating story that's actually has all of these twists and turns, including a most recent discovery in the 1990s in the Vatican Library that shed new light on, you know, where these stories came from, because it was a little bit mysterious where they came from. So anyway, we're doing 2 scenes from that, which are actually taken from, one is from the story of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. So it's kind of a series of, short little vignettes, let's say.
Okay. So great rundown of the pieces that are being shared here at the Banff Centre. And I am sensing a bit of a theme here as well, a sort of unification of all these different elements that exists within you, as well as we were talking about at the beginning, this unification of sort of Eastern and Western classical music, to be sure, but also of stories from those traditions, and then how do they interact as we make the whole world kin, and as we try and discover more and give more voice, more spotlight to that refugee experience. Do you ever think about the power that your music has to speak into maybe the sort of current zeitgeist on these matters, this mixing of ideas, this representation of different perspectives and different stories as you are making your work? Is that like a conscious thing because of the way the world is, or is it unconscious because it's just who you are in your life experience, in your music?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit more of the latter, although I'm certainly very, conscious of everything going around, as we all are, of everything going on around us. I feel like, especially with opera and with vocal music, which is what this presentation is about, for me, it's really has to do with storytelling, right? And storytelling exists in every culture, and storytelling and maybe humor as well, is to me kind of the best way entry into people's hearts, into their consciousness, right? Rather than polemical kinds of things, right? More sort of storytelling and getting enraptured, engrossed in the story and being moved and edified by the story, as opposed to being told, X, Y, or Z.
I see. What do you hope, as you are about to leave Banff in just a week's time, what do you hope to have taken away from this place that not only comes into these projects, these stories that you are turning into music, but also into future projects, things that you have on the go in other parts of Canada and the United States?
Well, I'll certainly look back fondly. I can even say that now before it's over, to the time here, because it was really productive, both in terms of getting things done, but also learning a lot, right? I mean, I learned a lot from all of the musicians who interacted with my music. As I told them at the beginning of the 2 weeks, this is as much about you giving to me as me giving to you. And so, all their feedback, from the very smallest mundane details to the sort of more overarching themes of pacing and tenor and all that kind of stuff, all of that stuff kind of, you soak it in, and then eventually it comes back out in various ways in your work in the future.
We're excited to hear those future works when they come out, and we're excited to see these pieces in their fullest iterations wherever they may be. Karim, al-Zand, so great to talk to you about this music. Thank you so much for taking the time, and all the best as you showcase these works here at the Banff Centre.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.